I am here to answer all of your solo travel questions, all of your solo travel queries. I'm going to be talking about things like saving, budgeting, how to choose where to go, what I pack when I go solo traveling, accommodation questions, hotels, apartments, hostels, Airbnbs, how to meet people, what activities, how to find activities, how to navigate feeling scared or lonely or anxious. I hope to cover a lot of ground in this video, and I hope that you will leave watching this feeling inspired to solo travel if it's like something that you want to do. Maybe you'll feel a bit more courageous and have a bit more motivation to book the trip. So let's chat. I've tried to be an organized person and broken all the questions I've gotten into categories. So we're going to be talking about money and logistics first, and then making decisions. So taking action and like choosing and deciding, and then packing, and then accommodation, and then activities, and lastly safety. Let me just quickly run through like my history with solo traveling so that you have a bit more context. So I took my first solo trip in 2022, and I went to Amsterdam, Menorca, and London. All of the travel I had done in the past had been with ex-partners or with friends, and I had just stepped into a chapter of my life where I was newly single, and I still wanted to do things and wanted to take trips. And the thought of a solo trip did it both frightened me and excited me, which I think is like a good anxiety to follow when something like, oh, it's kind of scary, but it's also kind of exciting, and it has like an upwards feeling and like oh, there's so much possibility here. And yeah, that was the first solo trip that I went on, and it was for about 3 weeks. And then the next solo trip was the following year, and I went to New York and to LA I spent a week in each place, so a 2-week trip. And that was an amazing trip. I feel like every time I take a solo trip, each time I feel more capable and more confident, and I feel like that is such the beauty of solo travel. The next trip I did was actually moving, and I moved to London. And I'm from London originally. I was born here. I lived here for 5 years at the start of my life before moving to Australia, and I have family here, so it is very much feels like home, and it feels like a base. And then whilst I was living in London, I took a solo trip to Sweden for 2 weeks into the countryside. And then I also went to Barbados at the end of last year, but I did go and meet up with family, so it felt like halfway between a solo trip and a family trip. But how do we save and how do we budget for solo travel? So the first trip I took, I said it was in 2022, and at the time I was working full-time in architecture, and I was living at home as well, so I had the ability to save quite quickly because I didn't have many expenses, and I was working full-time. I could save all the money that I was making. When I went away, I did like use up all of my money, and then I came back and worked again. And I was also budgeting at that time as well to make sure that I wasn't spending too much on like eating out and groceries. So I had a budget template, which I'll leave in the description. It was a Notion template that I made, and I would just set fixed amounts for myself to spend each. I think I did it fortnightly because my pay cycle was fortnightly. So I'd say I'm going to spend this much on like groceries this week. I'm going to spend this much on social things and going out. I'm going to spend this much on like my fixed payments, like my subscriptions and all my fucking storage that I pay for. And also because my pay was regular, it was the same amount I was getting paid each fortnight. I was able to like create a set a budget that I could stick to, and I could like forecast for the next few months and be like, okay, well, that's the amount I think I'm going to have saved. And it was easy for me to have like a clear view of my finances. And then I'd also try and calculate how much I would spend on the trips. So I'd look at accommodation beforehand and try and I'd use Google to like figure out how much groceries would cost in the place I was going to, and then try and create like a budget for the time that I'd be away, so I kind of had a rough amount of how much I wanted to save. And then I've gotten a few questions about SIM cards and how I stay connected whilst I am traveling. I always use Airalo when I go traveling for my SIMs. They're a company that offer eSIMs, and they offer SIMs for over like 200 countries and regions. And I'm very happy that they have partnered with me for this video. It's like a perfect fit. So I first used Airalo when I went to Sweden last year, and I've since used it in Amsterdam and Portugal, and I recently used it in Morocco as well. I love using Airalo because I just feel like it takes out so much hassle of the whole SIM situation when you're traveling, because they are completely digital. So you download the app and you download the SIM on your phone, and there's no physical SIM cards, there's no waiting in lines. Downloading their SIMs is also pretty straightforward. You just need a stable internet connection, and then they give you instructions on the app when you purchase the eSIM. After the first time I installed one, it was really easy to get the hang of it. I always find I'm so last minute with downloading my eSIMs, and I end up doing it like in the airport line or on a train somewhere, and using the Wi-Fi connection there. But I would recommend downloading it before you go on your trip and then just activating it when you get to your destination. So I'll show you how it works in the app so that you have a bit more of a clear picture. So you go into the app and then you choose where you're going to go. So let's say that we're going to Spain. Then you see the options for the data that you can get. So you can get 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 3 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes, 10, there's heaps of options. And then even if you choose, say you're like slightly unsure if you're going to actually need like heaps of data, you could get the 3 gigabyte plan and press buy now. And then if you run out, you can get a top-up package, and you always get a notification when you've got 25% of your data remaining, which is very, very handy. And I recommend buying the top-up package when you get the notification, because a few times I have not, and then it's frustrating because you need to find Wi-Fi. So whenever you get the 25% remaining, you just go and top up, and you can then purchase however much you want to top up. And then I'll just go to one of my past eSIMs to show you the instructions that you get. So this is one I had in Morocco, and when you download it, you get a page like this, and you can see the instructions here. So it's pretty straightforward. You just have to mess around in your settings a bit, but like I said, after I did it the first time, I pretty easily got the hang of it. And another thing I love about Airalo is that you also gain something called air money when you buy their eSIMs and when you top up. And the air money is an in-app reward currency. So you accumulate the air money over time, like as you purchase eSIMs, and it never expires, which is great. The other day when I was in Morocco, I went to top up my SIM, and I was like, oh, I have $10 of credit, which I didn't even know that was a feature, but it was so handy. I was like, oh, now I don't have to pay. I can just use my air money to top up my SIM. And you also get to keep your phone number when you download the eSIM, so you don't have to mess around with like telling people what your new number is. You can just communicate with people on WhatsApp. So I definitely recommend downloading Airalo and using them when you go traveling for your eSIMs. You can use my code CAMDOESIT3 for $3 off of your purchase when you get your eSIM. And thank you to Airalo for working with me. Literally, I love it when collaborations are aligned. The integration, integrated. Okay, the second chapter is making decisions. So how do we choose what country to go to? How do we make the decision? How do we take the first step? So in terms of choosing a place that you want to go to, well, I think you need to first think about, what do you like doing? What are your intentions with traveling? What do you want to see? What are you passionate about? And then try and find a place that's aligned with those passions and interests that you have. So you're not just willy-nilly randomly picking a place. Maybe you're really into food from a certain place and you really want to learn more about the food in a place, or maybe you want to learn more about the architecture in a certain place, or there are so many things that places offer. But yeah, I think first starting with yourself and what interests me, and then the place will hopefully arise from that. For me, how I've decided where to go traveling in the past has been either motivated by thinking about where I want to live. I feel like that's been a big factor in choosing the places that I go to. So when I went to New York and LA, the reason I went to those two places was because I was like, maybe I want to live in New York, or maybe I want to live in LA. So I wanted to go and see what the place was like before just making a decision of I want to move to this place. Also, when I went to Sweden last year, I ended up on that solo trip just because I wanted a couple of weeks to myself in a really peaceful place. And that trip came about because of the Airbnb I found. I was literally just scrolling on Airbnb for a week trying to find a little cabin with a sauna and a lake, and it just so happened to be in Sweden. So yeah, I think that choosing the place starts with your own intentions first. And how do you begin to structure solo traveling to a specific location? I'm a planner when it comes to going to places. I don't just rock up somewhere and not have any idea of the place. I like to do my research first, and also like I'm in Google Maps like street view before I go to a place, and I'm like walking around. I'm like, oh, this is what it's like here, interesting. And I'll like go to my accommodation and like go on the street view and walk around. It's fun. That's what I used to do when I worked in the office. I look at blog posts, I look at TikToks, I watch YouTube videos, I just try and get information from lots of different places on what to do in the place that I'm going to, what's interesting there, like what are the main sites, what's the history of the place. Someone said, I'm in a relationship but I want to solo travel. Any advice? This is an interesting question. And I can't say I've ever been in this situation because all of the solo travel I've done has been while I've been single. But if it's something you really want to do and you have a huge longing to do for yourself, to solo travel, then tell them why and reassure them that it's not about them. It's not that you don't want to travel with them, it's just that you want to have this experience of solo travel and you feel like it would be really beneficial for yourself and for your own like personal growth and your personal development, and it's nothing to do with like the love that you have for that person. It's just like something that you want to experience. And maybe you can go to a place together and then take little solo trips from that place. I don't know. And then the next chapter is about packing. So, top 5 items you never travel without. I love this question. It's a hard one though. 5 items. I have many items I will not travel without. My speaker is one of them. I always travel with my portable speaker. Always. Speaker. I always travel with a candle. Sounds silly because like you can buy a candle when you're in a place, but sometimes you arrive and it's nighttime and you just want to light a candle and have a little cozy moment to yourself, especially solo travel. Like you want to create a cozy space, you want to have the ambiance. I love taking a candle and incense. Speaker. I sometimes take tea with me as well. I know you can buy the tea in the place, but sometimes you want to have your tea, you know? Always a book, my journal, like activities, because I'm going to be by myself, so I need things to entertain myself. So my book, my journal, my paints, my music, my headphones, like all of the things that put me into my world. My camera, a reusable water bottle is always handy. Sometimes I like to take a pillowcase or 2 with me just because they're light and it's nice sometimes to sleep on your own pillowcase. Also a vibrator. The company I work for, Libido, I always take my vibrator with me when I go traveling as well because I'm solo traveling and I want to have a good time. Yeah, those are the essentials for sure. And then accommodation. I have questions on accommodation. So, I'm readjusting. Someone's asked hotels, Airbnbs, hostels. How do you find places in Airbnbs? I usually like to stay in Airbnbs. I've learnt that I don't actually love hotels. I feel quite confined in hotels and like claustrophobic because hotel rooms typically aren't that big. And then you can't cook your own food. I guess that's the whole point because you go out to eat. But I like to cook my own food and it also saves money when you're traveling. My preference is always Airbnb or like a bed and breakfast. And I feel like there are just qualities in space that I look for in Airbnbs or wherever I'm staying. Like I want natural light. I want like simple things, like not too cluttered. I love a table by a window. I love when places feel like somewhere I can make my own little cocoon and like a home and make cozy. So I feel like that's the quality that I look for in Airbnbs. And in terms of how I find them, if I know I'm going away and I'm looking for an Airbnb, I'll usually spend a few days looking for somewhere or like a week. I don't really make impulse decisions with accommodation. I like to make sure that I find somewhere that I'm going to feel comfortable because like a lot of people say that when you travel, you don't spend time in the accommodation. So it doesn't matter, like you're going to be out all the time, but not me. Like I like to be in the space. I like to wake up and have my nice morning, and I feel like it just makes travel, especially solo travel, so much more of an enjoyable experience when you have a space that you can feel like at ease and calm in. But also, again, sometimes you need to save money and choose cheaper accommodation like hostels, and sometimes it's necessary, but I usually like to find somewhere where I can have my own space, just because it helps me feel a lot more grounded when I am traveling, which I need. So that's my thoughts on accommodation. Now, activities. So how do you meet people? I would like to go out but not alone, somebody has said. Most of the time when I meet people when I'm traveling, it's either through Instagram, like people I've connected with on Instagram who I've been following, and I know that they live in this place, and I'm like, hey, do you want to meet up for a coffee? Or like when I was just in Morocco, I was sitting in this cafe doing work one afternoon, and then these two girls were sitting next to me, and I forget how conversation started. They then asked if I was doing anything in the evening and if I wanted to go out with them. I had to politely decline the offer because I didn't want to go out because my flight was the next day and I just couldn't deal with a clubbing night. I would think that a big thing with meeting people when you're solo traveling is like just putting yourself out there and being open and speaking to strangers and just like not being too closed, which I think that when you solo travel you automatically do like become a lot more open to things and to opportunities and experiences. Things come your way a lot, I think, when you're solo traveling, because people see that you're alone, and I think people want to include and people want to be welcoming, and you'll meet other people that are in the same boat of also solo traveling, and then just like you never know what's going to happen, I think, when you're solo traveling, because things just happen and then all of a sudden you're like friends with somebody and hanging out. But I think that it's not really something that you can like plan that much. I think things will just conspire and happen and eventuate and unfold. How do you find group classes or retreats? Google is my best friend. And having a clear idea of what you want to find, like what kind of activities are you looking for, what kind of circles are you trying to be amongst. Facebook groups also, like just searching keywords of whatever it is that you're looking for. And Eventbrite is also good. I found a lot of good things recently on there, like just in London. But know what it is that you want to find and just Google and go on a search and get lost in the slippery slopes of the internet and you'll find something. Like the course that I just did in Morocco, a lot of people ask me how I found that. It was like a natural building workshop for 8 days. And I literally just Googled one night. I searched like natural building workshop yoga Europe and that came up. SEOs really do be working. If you know where you want to go and you have the keywords, like Google will take you there. And someone said, how do I fill my days, resting or adventuring? A bit of both, honestly. Every day we have to have a sprinkle of rest and a sprinkle of adventure. There are definitely certain things that I like to do and that I will do in any place, like having a nice morning and I'll stretch and meditate and read and like go out for a walk and just see what's around me, take photos, go out and get something to eat, but then also getting out and like going on adventures and doing activities, like depending on where you are. Maybe you're by the sea and you go kayaking or canoeing or paddleboarding or snorkeling, or maybe you're in the mountains and you go for a hike, or you do a cooking class or yoga classes. That's also a great way to meet people, like doing classes and group activities, and then you'll meet other people who are most likely travelers as well, and then you can connect. But yeah, I spend my days doing both resting and adventuring. But I never feel bored when I'm solo traveling. I feel like I've always got something to do, some little activity or like something to walk around and see. Because you're in an unfamiliar place, like there's so much to take in. You could just like go and sit in the park or go and sit in a public space and just observe and watch things and just see how people are living in this place that you're in that's probably completely different to where you're from. And then next is safety. So a lot of people ask about feeling scared and how I stay safe when I'm solo traveling, if I get anxious, if I get lonely and uncomfortable when I'm in a new place. And so there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with safety and like feeling scared. I feel like my experience with solo travel has really like shown me that a lot of the time people usually don't have like cruel, malicious, evil intent. And people are kind and people are caring and genuine a lot of the time, I find. And so I feel like there are general things that I do in order to like be safe, but I don't feel that scared when I'm in a place. Like there's been times with like, it's always the men in places sometimes, they're just very bold and entitled and just weird, and like people, they just expect to have your attention and your gaze a lot of the time. So I feel like that's the scary part solo traveling as a female, is like the men sometimes. But I think also just you have to be, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, I don't have time for you sometimes, and just move on and not engage in things sometimes, and balance that with like a friendliness and kindness. Most of the time I feel really safe in places and I don't feel afraid. And I think that the way that I got to this place of feeling more safe in the world is by just getting out and realizing, like through experience, like my experiences have really affirmed to me that the world can be a positive place and people can be really kind and friendly. And I do sometimes get anxiety and I do sometimes feel scared when I'm in a place. Like when I was in Sweden last year, I stayed in this cabin by myself for 2 weeks, and it was on a property where the people who owned the land also lived on the property, like in the main house separate, but they went away for a weekend and it was just me in this cabin on this land in the dark, and it was so like in the middle of the forest, and I definitely did feel uncomfortable and a bit afraid at times, and like I'm in an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar people or no people in the dark. By myself. I'm very vulnerable. My mind can very easily get lost in like scenarios and like imagining bad things happening. But I always just have to bring myself back and be like, I'm safe. It's just me. Like, and also I feel like sometimes when you feel afraid, you're like centering yourself in like someone's going to do something to me. And so that's always how I bring myself back. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's not all about me. People aren't coming to attack me. Like, I'm going to be fine. But my mind will jump 0 to 100. This person's gonna come and kill me in a matter of seconds. And it's just about bringing myself back to like, this is reality. Nobody's coming for me. I'm safe. In terms of feeling lonely, I definitely do get moments of loneliness when I'm solo traveling sometimes. I feel like it usually hits in the evenings. But it's like this sense of loneliness that feels kind of like held. It's like it's anchored in like self-trust and self-belief, and also this like anchor of belonging in a way, like belonging to myself, and like wherever I am, I feel like I can find moments of belonging that make me feel at home and at peace, whether it's just through like little rituals or routines, like having a slow morning to myself, journaling, reading. Those little things really feel like home to me and really help like soothe the loneliness I can sometimes feel. When I was in Morocco, I did a page in my journal, which I showed in one of my previous videos, where I just thought about all of the things that make me feel centered and like grounded. And those things are things that what I'm talking about, like things that anchor me in the sense of like ubiquitous belonging and love that I can feel in any place. It's about being with myself and doing the certain activity or ritual or whatever it is. And it's not so much about being in the company of people sometimes. It's like I can be in my own company and have the company of my things and of my activities, and that can be enough to soothe the loneliness sometimes. And also like call your friends while you're traveling and tell them what you've been up to and share your experiences that way, because also like the loneliness of solo travel when you're traveling is one thing, but then I think there's also like a loneliness of the post solo travel. You've gone and had this whole trip by yourself, and I feel like sometimes I felt this sense of like, damn, like I can't really go to anyone and be like, oh, remember the time we did that, and like have this moment where we can reminisce. It's all like within myself, which I think is also a big part of why I love making videos, because I feel like I'm sharing my experience and like sharing my view of like how I'm seeing things. I feel like find a way to channel your experience and share it, whether you're taking photos or you're writing or you're drawing, or I feel like documenting your experience in some way so that you can share it with people when you return is really, really lovely. I love the idea of like making PowerPoints or having some sort of slideshow to recap with friends when you get back from a trip. And in terms of like feeling uncomfortable when I arrive to an unfamiliar place, I always like to give myself grace and remember that I'm in an unfamiliar place. Like, of course, I'm gonna feel slightly uncomfortable, and there's nothing wrong with that. And just giving myself time to settle, which I think is linked to like the amount of time that you spend in a place. I always like to go on solo trips for like longer than 5 days, because anything shorter than a week, I feel, is like very fleeting, and you don't get a chance to actually like be in the place and properly experience it. Even a week is short sometimes, because I feel like it takes a couple of days to get settled and feel comfortable, and for the place not to feel unfamiliar. There's definitely like a period, a few days, where it's like, give yourself grace. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. You're in a new place, but like, let's ease into it. So I'd say that that's how I deal with that feeling of discomfort. It's like just accepting that it is uncomfortable at the start, but you'll ease into it. But yeah, I hope that that was somewhat a helpful chat about solo travel. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments and we can chat there. Yeah, and I want to hear about where do you want to take a solo trip? Like, where do you want to go? What's your next? Where's calling you? Or what are you interested in? Maybe we can like think of places together. Like, if you don't know where you want to go, maybe comment like what you're interested in, and we can think about what places would be aligned with those interests. But yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this video, this little chit chat. It's been lovely to sit down with a cup of tea and have a chat. But yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. I hope that you've enjoyed this. Mwah, mwah, mwah.